In 2026, doctors quietly lowered the cholesterol target most adults are supposed to hit. Almost nobody has caught up with the new number. A study published this month from Harvard Medical School found something specific. 1 in 3 adults without heart disease are already above the new goal. 3 in 4 of them are getting no treatment for it at all. This isn't a story about a new drug. It's about a number sitting in your last blood test, and a mechanism inside your gut that most people have never heard connects to it. Doctors rarely have 15 minutes to explain both. So most people leave with neither piece of information and carry on for years without either one. By the end of this video, you'll know your actual target. You'll also know what recent research says your gut bacteria might already be doing to help you reach it every single day without you asking it to. Here's what actually changed. For years, cholesterol targets were built around broad categories: healthy, borderline, high. In 2026, updated dyslipidemia guidelines replaced that broad system with sharper, risk-specific numbers. If you've never had a heart attack or stroke, your target now depends on your personal risk level. Low-risk adults have one number. Higher-risk adults have a stricter one. The guidelines also lowered the threshold considered acceptable for people already living with heart disease. This wasn't a small tweak. It was a genuine tightening. Years of accumulated evidence pointed to the same conclusion, study after study. Safe needed to be lower than the older thresholds assumed. Guidelines like this don't change casually. A body of researchers reviews accumulated trial data, sometimes spanning decades, before recommending a shift this significant. By the time a number like this moves, the evidence has usually been building for years, quietly, in the background of ordinary clinical practice, long before any headline announced it. Researchers at Harvard and Mass General Brigham wanted to know something simple. How many adults actually meet these new numbers? They pulled data from a major national health survey covering adults aged 30 to 79. The results were stark. Among adults without heart disease, 32% were above their new goal. Among those already classified as high risk within that group, that number jumped to nearly 83%. Among adults who already have heart disease, the picture split in two. Most were already on cholesterol-lowering medication. They just weren't hitting the new, lower target. A smaller group, still nearly 2 in 5, weren't on any treatment at all. The lead researcher put it simply: heart disease remains a leading cause of death in this country. A large share of heart attacks and strokes are preventable with medications available for decades. Here's why this matters beyond the statistics. Cholesterol management gets treated as a fixed equation. Genetics plus diet equals your number. Take a pill if it's too high. That framing isn't wrong. It's incomplete. It leaves out an entire system that actively participates in how much cholesterol ends up in your bloodstream. Your gut. Most people have never heard that the bacteria living in their intestines directly influence cholesterol levels, not through diet choices alone, through a separate biological mechanism running in parallel. That mechanism is where this story actually gets interesting. Doctors rarely have time to explain it. A 15-minute appointment barely covers the number itself, let alone the biology determining it. The conversation stops at, eat better, take this pill. An entire lever most people could actually use goes unmentioned entirely. This isn't a criticism of doctors. It's a structural problem. A system built around short visits doesn't have room for a mechanism this specific. Not because doctors don't know it. There's rarely enough time to walk through it with every patient, every single visit, on top of everything else a checkup already needs to cover. There's another structural piece worth naming: Follow-up visits happen more often for people already flagged as high risk or already living with heart disease. Someone in the lower risk category may drift quietly above target for years. They may go years between the kind of appointment where this conversation would even come up naturally. The system isn't ignoring them on purpose. It simply wasn't built to catch a slow, symptomless drift like this one. The next question is the one worth sitting with. What is your gut actually doing to your cholesterol right now? Without you knowing it, think of cholesterol in your bloodstream as water in a bathtub. A tap adds it in. A drain takes it out. Your liver controls both. Your gut controls the drain more than most people realize. Here's the mechanism. Your liver uses cholesterol to make bile acids, compounds that help you digest fat. Once used, most of those bile acids get reabsorbed further down your digestive tract. They get recycled back to the liver. Very little goes to waste under normal conditions. Certain gut bacteria interrupt that recycling. They produce an enzyme called bile salt hydrolase. It breaks apart bile acids into a form your body can't easily reabsorb. Those altered bile acids get excreted instead of recycled back. This forces your liver to respond. To keep producing enough bile acids for digestion, it pulls more cholesterol out of your bloodstream. It uses that cholesterol to make new bile acids. The drain opens wider. Blood cholesterol drops as a direct consequence of that extra demand. There's a second, separate pathway working alongside this one. Certain gut bacteria can convert cholesterol directly into a compound called coprostanol. Your intestine absorbs coprostanol far less efficiently than it absorbs cholesterol itself. Cholesterol that gets converted this way effectively passes through and out, rather than entering your bloodstream at all. Two separate bacterial mechanisms, both quietly reducing how much cholesterol makes it into your blood in the first place. This isn't a fringe theory. It's been demonstrated directly in controlled human trials, not just in animal models or lab dishes sitting in a research freezer somewhere. One randomized, double-blind trial tested a specific bile salt hydrolase-producing strain, Lactobacillus reuteri, NCIMB 30242, delivered in capsule form, given to adults with high cholesterol. Over 9 weeks compared to placebo, LDL cholesterol dropped by 11.64%. Total cholesterol dropped by over 9%. Non-HDL cholesterol dropped by more than 11% as well. A separate trial used the same strain delivered through yogurt instead of capsules. It found a similar pattern over 6 weeks. The effect size was smaller. The direction was identical. A second, independent research team confirmed the same underlying mechanism. There's a second gut pathway working alongside the first. Fiber-fermenting bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids as a byproduct of digesting fiber your body can't break down alone. Those short-chain fatty acids travel to your liver. There, they do something specific. They limit the activity of an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase. That name might sound familiar for a reason. It's the exact enzyme that statin medications are designed to block. Your gut bacteria, fed the right fiber, appear to nudge the same biological switch. That's the same switch an entire class of cholesterol drugs was built specifically to target. This doesn't mean fiber and probiotics work as well as medication. The research doesn't support that claim, and this video isn't making it. What it does mean is that the mechanism connecting your gut to your cholesterol number isn't some vague wellness idea. It's a specific, measurable biological pathway, tested in randomized trials, working through the same general system, your medication targets, from a different angle entirely. Your gut isn't a bystander in this story. It's an active participant in the number that showed up on your last blood test. Whether you knew it or not, whether your doctor mentioned it or not, that pathway has been running in the background of every meal you've eaten this week. Watch how most people think about their cholesterol number, and the gaps become obvious fast. The first mistake is not actually knowing the number, not the category, the number itself. Borderline or a little high isn't the same as knowing your LDL in milligrams per deciliter. It's also not the same as knowing what the current guideline recommends for someone in your specific risk category. The lead researcher on the 2026 study said this directly. Know your LDL number. Know your personal target. If you don't know either, ask your doctor at your next visit. The second mistake is treating cholesterol as purely genetic. End of story. Genetics absolutely influence your baseline. But the bile acid pathway described earlier operates independently of genetics. It runs meal by meal. It depends on which bacteria are active in your gut on any given day, and what you happen to be feeding them. The third mistake is assuming a stalled number means a dosage problem alone. The study found that most people with heart disease who weren't hitting target were already taking a statin. The gap wasn't always about needing a stronger prescription. For some, it may be about missing pathways alongside medication. Pathways current treatment simply isn't designed to address. The fourth mistake is fearing medication side effects enough to quietly stop, without replacing that gap with anything else. Some people do experience real statin side effects. They need a different medical approach entirely, worked out carefully with their doctor. But stopping without any plan, while assuming diet alone will cover the difference, often leaves a measurable gap wide open for months or years. The fifth mistake is eating more fiber as a vague goal instead of a specific one. General fiber advice is everywhere. Fiber specifically chosen to feed bile acid metabolizing and short-chain fatty acid producing bacteria is a narrower target. Most people have never heard the distinction between the two. The sixth mistake is expecting results in days. The clinical trials showing measurable LDL reduction ran 6 to 9 weeks, not a few days. Gut bacteria populations shift gradually, not overnight. The cholesterol changes downstream of that shift follow the same slower timeline as the bacteria themselves. The seventh mistake is checking cholesterol once and never again. A single number from years ago tells you almost nothing about where you stand today. This is especially true after a guideline change that moved the target itself. Without a recent panel, you're comparing an old number to a target that may not even apply to it anymore. The eighth mistake is assuming this topic only matters once symptoms show up. Elevated cholesterol produces no symptoms most people notice. No ache, no fatigue, no obvious signal. That silence is exactly why the 32% gap can grow for years without anyone feeling compelled to check. None of these mistakes reflect a lack of effort. They reflect a genuine information gap. Nobody sits down in a quick appointment and explains bile salt hydrolase. But the gap is closable, starting with knowing the number itself today, not from memory of a test you took years ago. Here's what the research actually supports, translated into what you can act on this week. The first step is the one the lead researcher emphasized directly. Get your actual LDL number from your most recent panel. Ask your doctor what your specific target is under the current guidelines. This single step is where the 32% gap starts closing. You can't hit a target you don't know exists, and you can't have a specific conversation about a number you've never actually seen if you're not sure how to open that conversation. 3 questions cover it. What is my current LDL number? What is my personal target under the current guidelines? And if I'm above it, what are my actual options, including dietary ones, before we discuss medication changes? Those 3 questions, ask directly, turn a vague checkup into the specific conversation this entire video has been building toward. The second step is feeding the bile acid pathway specifically. Foods rich in soluble fiber feed the bacterial pathway that pulls cholesterol toward bile acid production. Oats, beans, lentils, apples, psyllium. This isn't generic eat more fiber advice. It's specifically the fiber type shown to interact with this exact mechanism. Here's the number that makes this concrete instead of vague. A meta-analysis combining 181 randomized trials over 14,000 participants found something specific. Each additional 5 grams of soluble fiber per day lowers LDL cholesterol by roughly 5 to 8 points. 5 grams is smaller than it sounds. A cup of cooked black beans, a bowl of oatmeal, half an avocado alongside a handful of berries. The fiber type matters too. Research specifically points to viscous fiber, the kind that forms a thick gel in your gut, as the most effective. Oats, barley, psyllium, chia seeds, and beans all qualify. A concentrated oat beta-glucan trial found 6 grams a day for 6 weeks, produced a measurable LDL reduction. That's the same beta-glucan already discussed in an earlier video on this channel, there for its effect on your gut lining directly. The third step is considering fermented foods with documented bile salt hydrolase activity. The strongest clinical evidence so far centers on a specific Lactobacillus reuteri strain tested in both capsule and yogurt form. Not every probiotic on a shelf has been tested this way. Treat this as a conversation to have with your doctor, not as a blanket recommendation to grab the first probiotic bottle you see. The fourth step is protecting your timeline expectations. Give any dietary change at least 6 to 9 weeks before evaluating whether it moved your number. That matches the actual clinical trial timelines described earlier. A single good week won't show up on a blood panel, no matter how disciplined it was. The fifth step is not treating this as a replacement for medication you've been prescribed. If you're already on a statin and not hitting your target, this research suggests an additional lever, not a substitute one. That specific conversation belongs with your doctor, informed by your actual numbers, not by a video you watched. The sixth step is retesting, not guessing. Cholesterol panels are inexpensive and widely available. After several weeks of a genuine dietary change, a follow-up panel tells you something specific. Whether your gut responded the way the research suggests it might in your own body, not just in a study population. The seventh step is pairing this with what earlier videos on this channel already covered. Chewing thoroughly supports digestion broadly. Spacing water away from meals protects stomach acid strength. Building consistent fiber intake feeds this exact bacterial pathway. None of these habits exist in isolation from each other. They reinforce the same underlying system, meal after meal. The eighth step is patience with the process itself, not just the timeline. Some weeks your fiber intake will be excellent, other weeks it won't. The bacterial populations this video describes respond to overall patterns across weeks and months, not to any single perfect day. None of this requires an extreme diet overhaul. It requires knowing a specific number, it requires feeding a specific bacterial pathway, and it requires giving that pathway the specific amount of time the actual research took to show real, measured results. Here's the part of the Harvard study that deserves more attention than the headline number. Researchers didn't just measure people who already knew they had a cholesterol problem. They measured a broad national sample. This included people who had never been flagged as high risk at all. Even in that lower risk group, nearly 1 in 10 were already above the new target. Climb into the higher risk primary prevention group. Adults without heart disease but carrying real risk factors already. The picture changes sharply here. 83% were above goal. Not a third. Not half. The overwhelming majority of that entire group sitting quietly above target with no diagnosis to prompt a closer look. This is the group the guidelines exist specifically to protect before a first heart attack or stroke ever happens. It's also the group most likely to have no idea their number has drifted this far from target. Nothing has gone wrong yet. Nothing has prompted the conversation. The absence of a crisis, ironically, is what lets the gap keep growing undisturbed. Here's the inversion worth sitting with. The people most protected by knowing this information are, structurally, the ones least likely to have been told it. No heart attack means no cardiology follow-up. No follow-up means no repeated conversation about targets. The system built to catch this gap depends, in practice, on a crisis happening first, which is precisely backward from how prevention is supposed to work. Think about what that actually means for someone reading their own recent blood panel right now. If nothing has gone wrong yet, there's a real chance nobody has walked them through what above goal actually means for their specific risk category. The silence isn't reassurance. It's often just the absence of a conversation that hasn't happened yet. The gut mechanism described earlier in this video matters more in exactly this context. Picture someone who hasn't had a cardiac event. Their doctor hasn't yet initiated medication. For that person, a dietary lever with real clinical evidence behind it is not a minor detail. It's one of the few tools available before the conversation escalates all the way to a prescription and a diagnosis. The researchers were careful about their framing, and this video will be too. This isn't evidence that diet replaces medication for people who need it. The lead author was explicit about the actual first step. Starting treatment, not replacing it, is what most people above target without any treatment actually need to do. What it does mean is this: the distance between above target and on track isn't only closed by a prescription. Part of it runs through a bacterial pathway inside your gut, active every time you eat. A pathway most people were never told existed in the first place, by anyone, at any appointment. That's a genuinely different way to think about a number most people either ignore or feel powerless about. Not powerless, underinformed. Those are two very different starting points. Only one of them leaves room to act before a crisis forces the issue into an emergency room instead of a routine visit. There's a reason this channel keeps circling back to your gut, no matter what part of your health the video is actually about. This connects directly to territory already covered here. The video on egg yolks and TMAO discussed how gut bacteria influence a completely different cardiovascular compound. The video on sweeteners discussed how erythritol and xylitol affect blood clotting risk. This video adds a third separate mechanism. Bile acid metabolism runs through the same digestive system as those other two mechanisms. It pulls cholesterol out of your bloodstream through a completely different pathway than either of them. But the same organ sits underneath all three stories. None of these are the same story wearing different clothes. They're three distinct, independently studied mechanisms. All three point to the same underlying fact. Your gut isn't a side character in your cardiovascular health. It's actively involved in multiple systems most people assume are governed entirely elsewhere. It's worth being precise here, the same way this channel has been in every video before this one. The bile salt hydrolase research is real, replicated, and published in peer-reviewed journals. It's not a claim that probiotics cure high cholesterol. It is not a claim that medication becomes unnecessary. The lead researcher on the 2026 guideline study was explicit. Most people above target need to start treatment, not avoid it. What changes with this information isn't whether you need a doctor's involvement, it's how complete that conversation can be. Walking in already knowing your number, your target, and a specific evidence-backed dietary lever gives you a fuller conversation. A better one than walking in with neither piece of information at all. This is also why this channel doesn't chase every trending cholesterol claim that shows up online. Plenty of content promises dramatic cholesterol drops from a single ingredient, with no clinical trial behind the claim at all. The distinction this channel insists on is boring by comparison. Real strain, real trial, real percentage, real timeline. That's a slower story to tell, but it's the one you can actually act on with confidence. Consider how this fits into the bigger picture this channel keeps building, video after video. Gut bacteria producing compounds that affect your brain. Gut bacteria affecting blood clotting. Gut bacteria pulling cholesterol out of your bloodstream through bile acid production. Different systems, same organ quietly running underneath all of them, doing more than almost anyone gives it credit for. There's a pattern worth naming across all of these videos. Each one starts with a fear or a warning most people have absorbed secondhand without ever hearing the actual mechanism behind it. Each one ends with something more specific and more useful than the original warning ever offered. That's not a coincidence. It's the format this channel is built around, applied to a new number each time. If this breakdown gave you a number to check and a mechanism to understand, follow this channel. New videos connecting research exactly like this arrive every few days. There's one more piece of this worth returning to before this closes. Go back to the number this video opened with. A guideline quietly changed in 2026. Most adults never caught up with it. You now know more than a headline statistic. You know that a third of people without heart disease are already above their new target. You know the number climbs past 80% in higher risk adults who haven't had a cardiac event yet. You know why that gap persists structurally without anyone doing anything wrong along the way. You also know something most people never hear connected to cholesterol at all. A specific bacterial pathway in your gut, activated by specific fiber, has been studied in randomized human trials. It pulls cholesterol out of your bloodstream by forcing your liver to convert it into bile acids, 11.6% in 9 weeks, in a controlled trial. Not a promise. A measured, published, replicated result. None of this replaces a conversation with your doctor. If anything, it gives that conversation more to work with. A number, a target, a mechanism most doctors won't have time to explain in a 15-minute visit. Already explained to you now before you even walk in the door for your next appointment. Picture that appointment for a moment. Instead of nodding along to a number you don't fully understand, you're the one asking about your specific target under the new guidelines. You're the one mentioning a dietary lever, backed by a randomized trial. That's a different kind of visit entirely, and it starts with information you now already have. The gap in this story was never really about medication versus lifestyle. It was about information reaching people before a crisis forces the conversation to happen at all. Most people only learn their real target after a heart attack makes it unavoidable. You just got that information early. On an ordinary day, before anything went wrong, while you still had every option available to you. That timing is the entire point. A dietary lever tested in a 9-week trial is far more useful before a cardiac event than after one. After a crisis, the conversation is already narrowed down to damage control. Before one, it's still a conversation about prevention, with every option still open. If today's explanation gave you a clearer picture than your last blood test summary ever did, follow this channel. New videos breaking down research exactly like this arrive every few days. Send this to someone who hasn't had their cholesterol checked in years, or to someone who has a number and no idea what it's actually supposed to be. There's a real chance they've never heard any of this connected together before in one place. Explain this clearly. Leave a comment with a health number you've been told to keep an eye on without ever being told what the actual target is. There's a good chance the research has a clearer answer than the one you were given. That's exactly the kind of question this channel exists to answer, one video at a time. The number on your last blood test was never the whole story. Today you found out what the rest of it actually says. This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult a healthcare professional.